The battleship Bismarck was one of Nazi Germany's most powerful war machines, and its mission in 1941 threatened the survival of Britain. When the ship entered the North Atlantic, its goal was simple: destroy Allied supply convoys. If those convoys stopped, Britain would run out of resources and collapse. Because of this, the moment Bismarck left port, the British Navy began tracking it with every ship and aircraft available. The situation was urgent, and the Royal Navy understood that stopping Bismarck was not optional. It was necessary for the country's survival. Bismarck was heavily armed, well protected, and considered nearly impossible to sink. Its thick armor, advanced targeting systems, and long-range guns were designed to overpower any enemy ship. Germany believed Bismarck represented a new era of naval power, and Hitler viewed it as a symbol of strength. When Bismarck left for its mission, expectations were high. The German Navy believed it could disrupt the Atlantic supply line and force Britain into a weaker position. The first encounter happened quickly. On May 24, 1941, Bismarck met the British battlecruiser HMS Hood and the newer battleship HMS Prince of Wales. What followed changed the entire mood of the war at sea. During the exchange of fire, a German shell entered Hood's ammunition storage, causing a massive explosion. The ship broke apart and sank in minutes. More than 1,400 British sailors died, and only 3 survived. The loss shocked the British public and deeply affected the Royal Navy. It became clear that Bismarck was not just a threat, it was a deadly force that needed to be stopped as fast as possible. After sinking Hood, Bismarck attempted to escape toward French France. There, German aircraft and submarines could protect it. If Bismarck reached the French coast, the British would lose their chance to stop it. The ship also suffered damage during the earlier fight. A shell from Prince of Wales had hit its fuel tanks, causing leaks. This reduced Bismarck's operating range and left an oil trail in the ocean that British scouts could use to track it. This damage became an important factor because it slowed Bismarck at the exact moment when the British forces were searching for it aggressively. The British Admiralty reacted with complete focus. Warships were ordered to intercept every possible route. Aircraft carriers moved into position. Reconnaissance planes began wide searches over rough seas. Churchill gave a direct order: sink the Bismarck. The Royal Navy understood that time was running out. Every hour mattered. The mission changed from a strategic requirement into a national priority. What no one expected was that the key to stopping one of the world's strongest battleships would not be another battleship, but a group of old biplanes with fabric wings and slow engines. As Bismarck continued toward France, the British forces tightened their search. The damage to its fuel tanks forced the ship to slow down, and the oil trail made it easier to follow. On May 26th, British observation planes finally spotted Bismarck again. Its location gave the British Navy one last chance to attack before it reached safer waters. The closest ship capable of launching an attack was the aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal, and the only planes available for the mission were Fairey's Swordfish torpedo bombers. The Swordfish were old, slow, and outdated compared to modern aircraft. They had fabric-covered wings, metal frames, and open cockpits. Their speed was so low that some considered them unsuitable for serious combat. However, their low speed and simple design gave them an unexpected advantage. Radar systems on Bismarck had difficulty detecting them, and the ship's anti-aircraft guns struggled to hit such slow targets. Instead of presenting a clear firing solution, the planes moved unpredictably from the gunner's perspective. The weather on May 26th was rough. Strong winds, rough waves, and poor visibility made flying difficult. Still, the Swordfish crews took off because they understood the importance of their mission. Their goal was not to sink Bismarck. It was to damage the ship enough to slow it down. If the rudder or propellers could be hit, Bismarck would lose maneuverability, giving British surface ships time to catch up. The Swordfish approached Bismarck at low altitude and began their attack runs. The German anti-aircraft guns opened fire, creating a wall of explosions around the planes. Despite this, the pilots held their course. Several torpedoes missed, but others hit the ship on the starboard side.
One of these torpedoes struck near the stern and jammed the rudder permanently. This single hit changed everything. Bismarck could no longer steer properly and began turning in circles. The battleship that had destroyed Hood and terrified the Royal Navy was now unable to escape. Once the rudder was damaged, Bismarck's fate was sealed. The Royal Navy's larger ships moved in overnight to close the distance. The Swordfish attack had accomplished what no battleship had managed to do. It trapped Bismarck in the open ocean. This moment became one of the most surprising turns in naval warfare. A group of outdated biplanes had disabled one of the most powerful battleships in the world, proving that even simple technology can have a major impact when used at the right time, under the right conditions. Once Bismarck lost control of its steering, the balance of power shifted instantly. The British Navy, which had been struggling to catch up for days, suddenly had an advantage. Destroyers, cruisers, and battleships were ordered to converge on the crippled German ship. Throughout the night of May 26th and into the early hours of May 27th, British destroyers attacked Bismarck from multiple directions. Their goal was not to sink it right away, but to keep constant pressure on the crew, limit any repair attempts, and prevent it from escaping. The destroyers fired torpedoes, launched star shells to light up the dark sea, and kept Bismarck under constant observation. Even though the destroyer's torpedoes caused minimal damage, the harassment forced the German crew to stay on alert and left no opportunity for them to fix the jammed rudder. Bismarck remained stuck.
Inside the ship, the atmosphere was tense. The German officers understood the seriousness of the situation. With the rudder useless, Bismarck could not sail in a straight line or return fire effectively. Attempts to fix the damage failed because the hit had twisted the rudder shaft. The engineering crew worked non-stop, even risking rising water levels and mechanical hazards, but nothing helped. Bismarck was now moving slowly in circles, completely exposed. The morale on board shifted from confidence to concern. The crew knew they were fighting against time, and the British fleet was getting closer with every passing hour. As dawn approached on May 27th, the final British strike group arrived. The battleships HMS King George V and HMS Rodney, along with cruisers and additional destroyers. These ships carried heavy firepower. Rodney alone had 9 16-inch guns capable of firing massive shells that could break through heavy armor. The Germans prepared for a final stand, but the outcome was already clear. Bismarck was outnumbered, outgunned, and unable to escape. At about 8:47 a.m., British ships opened fire. The bombardment was overwhelming. Shells from Rodney and King George V tore into Bismarck's superstructure, destroying gun turrets, communication systems, and control stations. The German crew attempted to fight back, but their aiming systems were severely compromised, and the damage from the torpedo strike made coordinated action nearly impossible. Within minutes, many of Bismarck's main guns were destroyed or jammed. Fires began spreading across the deck. Smoke poured into corridors and compartments. The German sailors struggled to contain the chaos, while the British ships continued their steady, destructive barrage. By mid-morning, Bismarck's upper decks were almost completely wrecked. The ship was still floating because of its strong armor and compartmentalized design, but it had no ability to defend itself. Torpedoes from British destroyers delivered the final blows. The order was then given to abandon ship. After hours of continuous damage, the once powerful battleship began to sink slowly into the Atlantic. At 10:39 a.m., Bismarck finally slipped beneath the waves. The pride of the German Navy was gone. Only around 115 men survived out of more than 2,000 on board. The sinking of Bismarck became one of the most studied naval events in modern history because of how unexpected the turning point was. A large, advanced battleship packed with the best German engineering had been critically disabled not by another modern battleship, but by old biplanes that many considered obsolete. The Fairey Swordfish aircraft had been designed in the 1930s, and by 1941, most military experts believed they were too outdated for major operations. They had a top speed slower than some modern cars and lacked protective armor. Yet these simple aircraft achieved what no other weapon could. They delivered a torpedo strike accurate enough to lock Bismarck's rudder and trap it. This forced analysts, historians, and military planners to rethink their assumptions about warfare. It showed that power is not based only on size or technology. Sometimes, a weakness in design or strategy can overshadow all technological advantages. Bismarck's heavy armor protected it from shells, but its stern design had a vulnerable point. The Swordfish pilots, flying low and steady, found that point. Their torpedoes struck at the right angle, at the right depth, and at the right moment. This one hit changed the entire course of the mission. The event also highlighted the importance of teamwork and coordinated effort in wartime. No single ship or aircraft could have sunk Bismarck alone. It took reconnaissance planes to locate it, destroyers to keep it under pressure, battleships to deliver heavy fire, and the old, outdated Swordfish biplanes to deliver the disabling strike. Each part of the Royal Navy contributed to the final outcome. The mission showed how a navy could use all its resources together to defeat a stronger opponent. For the German Navy, the loss was a major blow. Bismarck had been celebrated as a symbol of power and naval dominance. Its sinking, especially under such unusual circumstances, damaged morale and forced Germany to rethink its naval strategies. After this event, Germany became more cautious about sending large surface ships into the Atlantic. The psychological impact was significant. If such a powerful battleship could be taken down, other ships were at risk too. Years later, when explorers found Bismarck's wreck on the ocean floor, they could still see the damage from the final battle. The hull was intact in many places, showing how strong the ship had been. But the structural damage around the steering area made it clear that the torpedo hit was the key factor that sealed its fate. The evidence confirmed what history already recorded. The attack from slow, outdated biplanes was the turning point that made everything else possible. The attack on Bismarck also became an important case study in how limitations can become advantages in war. The Fairey Swordfish biplanes were originally criticized for being too slow, too old, and too lightly built. But these same traits helped them survive Bismarck's anti-aircraft fire. The ship's guns were designed to target fast-moving modern aircraft. Their aiming systems and prediction equipment struggled with the Swordfish because the planes flew at such low speeds and low altitudes that the computer-assisted gunnery miscalculated nearly every shot. Instead of being easy targets, the biplanes moved unpredictably in the eyes of Bismarck's gunners. The crew fired thousands of shells, but most missed or exploded too far away. This surprising mismatch between old planes and modern defenses played a key role in the attack's success. Another detail that helped the Swordfish was the structure of their wings and body. The aircraft were partially made of canvas, fabric, and metal frames. This reduced the radar reflection and confused the German detection systems. The planes approached in stormy weather, using low clouds and sea conditions to cover their movements. This made it very difficult for the Bismarck crew to detect the exact number and direction of the incoming aircraft. By the time the Swordfish were close enough to drop their torpedoes, the ship had only seconds to react. Even though Bismarck fired a wall of anti-aircraft fire, the biplanes pressed forward and released their torpedoes at the perfect moment.
The success of the Swordfish also showed how important pilot skill was. The crews flying these biplanes were used to rough conditions, and they trained heavily for torpedo drops at low altitude. They understood how waves, wind, and ship movement affected accuracy. Their experience paid off during the attack, especially in the rough weather of the North Atlantic. When the first wave of Swordfish attacked earlier that day, they mistakenly targeted a British ship due to poor visibility. But during the second attack, they corrected their approach and flew with absolute precision. Pilots risked their lives, flying through heavy gunfire and dangerous weather, but they stayed focused on the mission. Their courage and skill were the reason the torpedo hit the rudder at the perfect angle. After the attack, the Swordfish pilots returned to Ark Royal exhausted but hopeful. They didn't know the full effect of their strike yet, but they believed they had hit something important. Hours later, when news arrived that Bismarck was unable to steer, the significance of the mission became clear. The biplanes had accomplished what the entire British fleet had been trying to do for days. They stopped Bismarck from escaping. The impact of their actions spread quickly across the Royal Navy. Officers and sailors understood immediately that the end of Bismarck was now only a matter of time. British morale rose sharply because the greatest threat in the Atlantic was now trapped and vulnerable. This attack represented a turning point in modern aviation history. It demonstrated that aircraft, no matter how old or slow, could influence the outcome of naval warfare. It proved that naval air power was not just about speed or technology, it was about strategy, timing, and understanding weaknesses. The Swordfish, though simple, became symbols of ingenuity and determination. Their success forced militaries worldwide to reevaluate how they understood aircraft roles in maritime battles. The attack on Bismarck showed that even outdated tools could deliver powerful results when used creatively and fearlessly. The aftermath of Bismarck's sinking had immediate strategic consequences. Germany realized that sending large battleships into the Atlantic without strong air support was extremely risky. The loss of Bismarck meant that the Kriegsmarine lost its strongest surface ship early in the war. This forced Germany to shift its naval strategy towards submarines, which were harder to track and required fewer resources than massive surface vessels. The change was noticeable. After Bismarck's destruction, Germany relied heavily on U-boats to disrupt Allied shipping, leading to what became known as the Battle of the Atlantic. Although submarines were dangerous, the psychological blow from losing Bismarck weakened Germany's confidence in using traditional battleships. For Britain, the sinking boosted morale during one of the darkest times of the war. The early years of World War II were filled with uncertainty, shortages, and fear. But the victory over Bismarck showed that determination, coordination, and teamwork could defeat even the strongest enemy weapon. Newspapers across Britain celebrated the event. The Royal Navy received widespread respect for its persistence, and the success became a symbol of the nation's resilience. The public saw it as proof that Britain could still protect itself despite overwhelming odds. The international reaction was also important. The United States, still months away from entering the war, watched the Bismarck episode closely. The sinking demonstrated the importance of aircraft carriers and naval air power. Even though the U.S. Navy already had a developing carrier program, the success of Ark Royal's Swordfish reinforced the belief that carriers were the future of naval warfare. The battle showed that even powerful battleships could be neutralized by aircraft, especially when those aircraft targeted vulnerabilities rather than armor. The sinking also influenced how ships were designed in the following decades. Engineers began to emphasize air defenses, steering protection, and internal compartment strength. Many navies realized that a single weak point, like Bismarck's exposed rudder mechanism, could bring down an entire vessel. As a result, future warships received improved steering systems, backup controls, and better underwater protection. The lessons learned from Bismarck shaped naval engineering long after the war ended. On a human level, the survivors of Bismarck carried the memory of the event for the rest of their lives. Many German sailors expressed respect for the British Navy's relentless pursuit. Some described the final hours as chaotic, with fires, smoke, flooding, and constant bombardment. They were trained to protect their ship, but they knew the end was inevitable. British rescuers pulled survivors from the cold Atlantic waters, even while risking submarine attacks. Later interviews revealed that many survivors understood that their ship had been defeated not just by superior firepower, but by an unexpected combination of courage, strategy, and timing. As historians continued studying the event over the years,
they realized the story of Bismarck was more than just a military engagement. It was an example of how unpredictable war can be. A ship built with some of the strongest armor in the world was defeated because of a single weakness in its design. Bismarck's armor protected it from shell fire, but the steering gear, located near the stern and poorly shielded, left it vulnerable to torpedoes. Once the rudder was jammed, the battleship became nearly impossible to control. Naval experts later confirmed that even if the German crew had managed to slow the flooding or temporarily reduce the damage, the design flaw made full repair impossible at sea. This highlighted how a single engineering decision can determine the fate of a billion-mark warship. The attack also changed how navies viewed biplanes and other seemingly outdated technologies. Before the Bismarck chase, many military planners believed speed and modern design were the only things that mattered. The Swordfish proved that accuracy, training, and timing were equally important. Despite looking old-fashioned, they handled low-speed torpedo drops exceptionally well. Their pilots understood the behavior of their aircraft in rough weather and practiced hitting moving targets under pressure. Their reliability in extreme conditions impressed many naval commanders who had previously dismissed the aircraft as outdated. After the war, several Swordfish pilots recalled how they never expected to be the ones to cripple Bismarck, yet they knew they were trained to do exactly that kind of job. Their success reinforced the idea that even old equipment can become valuable when used correctly.
Another major lesson from the Bismarck event was the importance of teamwork between sea and air forces. Navies around the world recognized that battleships could no longer operate independently. They needed air cover, reconnaissance, and continuous communication with aircraft. The British operation against Bismarck required coordination between more than 30 ships and multiple aircraft squadrons. Without reconnaissance planes locating Bismarck again after the initial escape, the Swordfish attack would never have happened. Without destroyers maintaining pressure overnight, the ship might have gained enough stability to repair its steering. And without the final arrival of heavy British battleships, the Royal Navy might not have delivered the finishing blows. The sinking of Bismarck showed how modern warfare required every branch of the military to work together. The event also had long-lasting effects on German naval planning. Before Bismarck's failure, Germany had high hopes for its surface fleet. Battleships like Bismarck and Tirpitz were supposed to challenge British sea power. But the destruction of their most celebrated warship caused a major shift. Germany increasingly relied on U-boats, which were more effective for long-range disruption and harder to detect. The focus moved from prestige projects to practical weapons. This shift helped define the rest of the naval conflict in the Atlantic. Even today, historians often point out that the sinking of Bismarck played a role in shaping the future direction of naval warfare. As decades passed, the interest in Bismarck continued. In 1989, the wreck of Bismarck was discovered by Dr. Robert Ballard, the same oceanographer who located the Titanic. The discovery brought new attention to the ship and allowed researchers to examine its condition firsthand. What they found supported much of the historical analysis. Bismarck rested upright on the ocean floor, showing signs of intense battle damage. The hull was deeply scarred by shells, torpedoes, and explosions. However, the ship's armored belt remained mostly intact, confirming that Bismarck hadn't sunk solely due to British shell fire. Instead, internal flooding and the deliberate scuttling by the German crew played larger roles. The most important confirmation from the wreck was the structural damage near the stern, where the torpedo from the Swordfish attack had hit. The impact area showed severe twisting and destruction, proving that the jammed rudder was the critical factor that sealed the ship's fate. Researchers studying the wreck found other interesting details as well. Many of the ship's large guns were destroyed, but still pointed in different directions, showing that the crew attempted to return fire until the very end. Parts of the superstructure were completely shattered from the British bombardment. The damage patterns helped historians understand the sequence of the final battle. They confirmed that the British ships fired continuously from different angles, gradually reducing Bismarck's ability to fight back.
The wreck showed a mixture of toughness and vulnerability, strong armor combined with strategic weaknesses. This duality made Bismarck one of the most fascinating warships ever built. Ballard's discovery also sparked emotional responses from former sailors, families of those who served, and military historians. For survivors, it brought closure. Many expressed sadness when seeing images of the ship, which had once been considered unbeatable. They remembered the chaos of the final battle, the cold water of the Atlantic, and the loss of thousands of comrades. For British veterans, the discovery reinforced their understanding of how challenging the mission had been. It also reminded the world that behind every shipwreck are human lives affected by war's decisions and consequences. The wreck's condition remains surprisingly well preserved due to its depth and cold surroundings. At nearly 16,000 feet underwater, Bismarck lies in a place untouched by currents or sunlight. This allowed researchers to examine details like rivets, armor plates, and gun mounts. These findings helped naval engineers understand the strengths and flaws of early 20th century battleship design. The site is now considered a war grave and is treated with respect. Ballard and others emphasized that the wreck should remain undisturbed, serving as a historical reminder rather than an object for recovery. Even today, documentaries, books, and studies continue exploring why Bismarck's story remains so compelling. It combines engineering brilliance, design flaws, bravery from both sides, and an unexpected twist brought by outdated aircraft. The swordfish biplanes became legends not because they were advanced, but because they achieved what should have been impossible on paper. Their success, followed by the final battle that ended Bismarck's journey, turned this event into one of the most iconic episodes in naval history. As the story of Bismarck continued to be retold through documentaries, books, and military studies, many experts pointed out how the battle demonstrated the rapid shift in naval warfare during World War II. Just a few decades earlier, battleships were seen as the ultimate symbols of a nation's naval strength. Countries invested heavily in them, believing that bigger guns, thicker armor, and larger hulls were the key to dominance at sea. Bismarck represented this mindset more than almost any other ship of its time. It was built to overpower enemy vessels in a traditional gun-to-gun battle. But the events of May 1941 proved that the world had already moved into a new era, one in which aircraft carriers and air power were becoming the true rulers of the ocean. The attack by the swordfish biplanes highlighted the growing importance of naval aviation in a way that military leaders could not ignore. Even though the planes were outdated, their ability to strike from long distances and deliver a crippling blow showed that aircraft carriers could influence battles more effectively than giant battleships. The Royal Navy recognized the value of carriers after the attack, and other navies, especially the United States and Japan, had already been expanding their carrier fleets. The Bismarck incident became one more piece of evidence supporting the shift away from traditional battleship warfare. Within a few years, battleships around the world became secondary assets, used mainly for shore bombardment rather than sea control. The story also became a lesson in how unpredictable real combat can be. Bismarck should have been safe from lightly built planes, at least on paper. But design flaws, weather conditions, pilot skill, and strategic timing combined in a way that no one could have predicted. The Germans did not expect an old biplane to be their biggest problem. They expected torpedoes from submarines or heavy shells from British capital ships. Instead, an aircraft that looked like it belonged in the previous decade caused the most decisive damage of the entire operation. This unpredictability is part of what keeps the Bismarck story alive. It reminds historians and military planners that no weapon, no matter how powerful, is invincible.
Beyond strategy and engineering, the human side of the story remains equally meaningful. Thousands of sailors fought with determination on both sides. The British sailors carried a sense of duty and revenge after the loss of HMS Hood. The German sailors worked tirelessly to save their ship, even when the situation became hopeless. Many survivors later said that despite the chaos, there was a strong sense of responsibility and courage among the crew. The story of Bismarck is not only about steel and firepower, it is also about discipline, fear, bravery, and sacrifice. These human elements prevent the story from being reduced to just a technical discussion about warships. They show how real people were affected by decisions made far away from the battlefield. As time passed, Bismarck also became a symbol of change, representing the end of the battleship era and the rise of air power. It became a reference point for military instructors teaching naval strategy. Cadets around the world studied how the hunt unfolded, how coordination between ships and aircraft was achieved, and how a single torpedo could change the outcome of a massive operation. The story represents a turning point in modern naval history, and even today it is used to explain why aircraft carriers dominate naval fleets, while battleships have largely disappeared. Today, the legacy of Bismarck is a combination of engineering achievement, tragic loss, and unexpected vulnerability. It stands as one of the most studied shipwrecks in history because of what it represents. On one hand, it was a masterpiece of naval construction, fast, heavily armed, and durable. On the other hand, it was defeated by a combination of old aircraft, strategic errors, and design limitations. This contrast makes Bismarck one of the most fascinating warships ever built. The ship's story continues to attract interest because it shows how even the most advanced technology can fail under the right circumstances. It also highlights how important coordination and adaptability are in military operations. The sinking of Bismarck continues to influence how people understand warfare. It shows that a weapon's power is not the only factor that determines victory. Strategy, timing, and the ability to exploit weaknesses can be just as important. In the Bismarck case, the British Navy combined reconnaissance, persistence, and a bit of luck. The Swordfish torpedo strike was not just a random event. It was the result of trained pilots, coordinated planning, and the right opportunity. Without that single hit, Bismarck might have reached France and changed the course of the naval war in the Atlantic. Its destruction helped preserve Britain's supply routes and prevented a major strategic setback during a crucial stage of the war. The legacy also includes the ongoing debate about how exactly Bismarck sunk. Some experts argue it was mostly scuttling by the German crew to prevent capture. Others believe British torpedoes delivered the final damage. Both perspectives are supported by evidence, but all agree on one point. The ship had been fatally disabled long before it sunk. The Swordfish hit ensured that Bismarck could not escape, and once trapped, its destruction was unavoidable. This reinforces the idea that the biplane attack was the defining moment of the entire mission. Today, Bismarck remains at the bottom of the Atlantic, serving as a reminder of a different era of naval warfare. It represents the height of battleship design and the moment that battleships became obsolete. Naval museums, documentaries, and academic studies continue to revisit the story, ensuring it is not forgotten. The wreck is considered a war grave, and out of respect, expeditions avoid disturbing it. This respectful treatment shows that even decades later, the event is remembered not only for its military importance, but also for the lives lost. For many people, the story of Bismarck is compelling because it feels like a clash between old and new technology, between confidence and vulnerability, between power and unexpected defeat. The idea that a massive steel battleship could be stopped by slow, outdated biplanes remains one of the most surprising facts in military history. It continues to show how war often unfolds in ways no one expects. And that is why Bismarck's story, from its launch to its final moments, remains one of the most engaging and unforgettable episodes in naval warfare.